Have you ever been looked down on because of the clothes you wear or the color of your skin? We like to think the world has changed, but sometimes karma has to step in and teach a brutal lesson. In today's story, a haughty flight attendant makes the biggest mistake of her career when she blocks a humble elderly couple from entering first class. She mocks their clothes, calls security, and tries to humiliate them in front of everyone. What she doesn't know, that poor couple doesn't just have a ticket, they own the entire airline. And the justice they serve is ice cold. You do not want to miss the ending of this one. Like and subscribe, and let's get into the story. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz, reflecting off the polished terrazzo floors. It was the holiday rush, a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcase wheels, crying toddlers, and the incessant drone of announcements over the PA system. But at Gate 42, the departure point for Sovereign Air's flagship flight to London, there was a distinct divide. To the left lay the economy line, a snaking, restless beast of tired travellers clutching neck pillows and fast food bags. To the right was the first-class lane, a pristine strip of red carpet flanked by velvet ropes, empty and inviting. Standing guard at the podium was Tiffany St. Clair. Tiffany didn't just work for Sovereign Air. She believed she was Sovereign Air. With her uniform pressed to military precision, her blonde hair pulled back in a bun, so tight it pulled at the corners of her eyes, and a layer of foundation that cost more than a round-trip ticket to Ohio, she viewed herself as the gatekeeper of the elite. She wasn't just checking boarding passes, she was curating an experience. "Good morning, Mr. Kensington," Tiffany purred, flashing a practiced porcelain smile at a man in a bespoke Italian suit. She scanned his pass with a delicate flick of her wrist. "Seat 1A is ready for you. Champagne is already chilled." "Thank you, Tiffany." The man nodded, sweeping past her without breaking stride. Tiffany's smile dropped the moment his back was turned. She smoothed her scarf and scanned the terminal, her eyes narrowing as they landed on a couple approaching the red carpet. They didn't fit. The man, who looked to be in his late 70s, walked with a slight limp, leaning on a cane that had clearly seen better days. He wore a faded tweed flat cap and a beige windbreaker that was at least 2 sizes too big. Beside him, the woman wore a floral church dress under a heavy, shapeless wool coat, clutching a worn leather handbag that looked like it had been purchased at a flea market in 1995. They were black, elderly, and, in Tiffany's immediate assessment, entirely in the wrong place. Tiffany stepped out from behind the podium, physically blocking the entrance to the red carpet. She crossed her arms, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her bicep. "Excuse me," Tiffany said, her voice dropping the customer service sweetness and adopting a sharp, authoritative tone. "The line for Group 5 is over there, by the wall." She pointed a long, acrylic-nailed finger toward the chaotic mass of the economy line. The old man, whose name was Otis, paused and adjusted his glasses. He smiled warmly, the wrinkles around his eyes crinkling. "Oh no, miss. We're just trying to board. We're a little early, I suppose, but my knees aren't what they used to be." "I can see that," Tiffany said, her eyes raking over his scuffed shoes. "But this is the priority lane. It is reserved for first class, business class, and Diamond Medallion members only. Economy boarding hasn't started yet. You need to wait." Otis looked at his wife, Martha, who patted his arm gently. "We know it's the priority lane, dear," Martha said softly. "We have tickets." Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound devoid of humor. "Tickets? For first class?" She looked them up and down again, making a show of it for the businessman standing behind them in line. "Look, I don't want to cause a scene, but Sovereign Air has a dress code for our premium cabins. And even if you did manage to get an upgrade, I need to see boarding passes. Now." Otis reached into his pocket with a slow, trembling hand. He pulled out 2 folded pieces of paper. They weren't the crisp mobile passes on an iPhone 16 like the other passengers had. They were printed at home on standard printer paper, folded crookedly. Tiffany snatched them from his hand. She didn't even look at the names. She just saw the paper and scoffed. "Paper passes," she muttered, rolling her eyes. She walked back to her computer, typing furiously. "I'm going to have to verify these. People try to forge these all the time. It's pathetic, really." "We didn't forge anything," Otis said, his voice hardening slightly. The warmth was fading from his eyes. "We purchased these tickets." "Likely story," Tiffany shot back without looking up. "System's slow. Step aside. You're blocking the view for our actual high-value clients." Behind Otis and Martha, a tall man in a grey suit checked his Rolex. "Come on, honey," he muttered to his companion. "This is why they need better filtering at the security checkpoint." Tiffany beamed at the man in the grey suit. "I'm so sorry for the delay, Mr. Sterling. I'm just dealing with a situation. Please come around." She unhooked the velvet rope to let Mr. Sterling and his wife pass, forcing Otis and Martha to shuffle awkwardly out of the way, nearly tripping over the base of the stanchion. "It's humiliating," Martha whispered to Otis, gripping his hand tighter. "Otis, maybe we should just call—" "No," Otis said, his jaw setting. "Not yet. I want to see how this plays out." 10 minutes passed, then 20. The first-class cabin was nearly full. The business-class passengers had all boarded. Even the first few groups of economy had begun to file in through the other lane. Otis and Martha stood by the podium, ignored. Every time Otis tried to catch Tiffany's eye, she would pick up the phone, pretending to be on an important call, or turn her back to help a passenger who wasn't there. Finally, when the line dwindled, Tiffany turned back to them with a look of exaggerated exhaustion. "Are you two still here?" she asked, as if they were stray cats she had hoped would wander off. "You have our tickets," Otis said calmly, "and we would like to board." Tiffany sighed and picked up the printed papers she had tossed onto the counter. She finally glanced at the names: Otis Washington, Martha Washington. "Washington," she sneered. "Original. Look, I checked the manifest." She hadn't. "And there's been a glitch with these seats. Seat 2A and 2B are unavailable. They're broken. The recline function isn't working." "We don't mind," Martha said. "We just want to sit down." "It's a safety hazard," Tiffany lied smoothly. She enjoyed this power. It was the only part of her life where she felt in total control. She looked at these two, relics of a bygone era, looking like they scraped together their life savings for a flight they didn't belong on, and she felt a twisted duty to protect the brand image of sovereign air. "Here is what I'm going to do," Tiffany said, typing rapidly. The printer behind her whirred. "I'm reassigning you to row 48. That's in the rear, near the lavatories. Honestly, it's better for you. You'll be more comfortable with your own crowd." She ripped the new boarding passes off the printer and held them out. Otis didn't take them. He stared at her, his eyes dark and unblinking. "Young lady, I suggest you look at your screen one more time. Look at the passenger profile linked to those tickets. Look at the status code." Tiffany laughed, a harsh bark of a sound. "Status code? Sir, the only status you have is nuisance. Now take these tickets and get to the back of the plane, or I will have you removed from the terminal entirely. Do not test me today. I have a direct line to airport security, and I know the captain personally." "Is that so?" Otis asked. "You know Captain Anderson?" Tiffany faltered for a microsecond. She didn't know the pilot's name was Anderson. She had just assumed she could bluff. but she recovered quickly. "I know everyone who matters at this airline, and trust me, nobody knows you." She leaned over the podium, her face inches from Otis's. "This is first class. It is for COOs, celebrities, and people who matter. It is not for people who smell like mothballs and desperation. Now move." The insult hung in the air, heavy and toxic. The few remaining passengers in the gate area went silent, looking up from their phones. Martha's eyes welled with tears. She looked down at her coat, the coat she had bought 30 years ago, the one she loved because Otis had given it to her when they were struggling to pay the mortgage. That was the breaking point. Otis didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his oversized windbreaker. "Security!" Tiffany shrieked, jumping back. "He's got a weapon! Security!" Two TSA agents who had been chatting nearby perked up and started jogging over, hands on their belts. The gate area erupted into murmurs of panic. Otis slowly withdrew a cell phone. It was an old flip phone, taped together at the hinge. Tiffany let out a breath, her face flushing red with anger and embarrassment. "Oh, for God's sake, put that away." "I'm making a call," Otis said calmly, flipping the phone open. "You can make a call from the back of the line," Tiffany shouted, pointing to the exit. "Officer, these two are disrupting the boarding process and refusing to follow crew instructions. I want them escorted out. They are a threat to flight safety." The two officers, heavy-set men looking for an easy resolution, approached Otis. "Sir, ma'am, you need to listen to the agent. If you don't take your assigned seats, you won't be flying today. We paid for first class," Martha pleaded, her voice trembling. "And she said those seats are broken," the officer replied. "Bored. Take the new seats or leave. Don't make us use cuffs." Otis ignored the officer. He held the phone to his ear. "Hello? Yes. This is Otis. Yes. I'm at gate 42. No, we haven't boarded. We're being blocked. By whom? Her name tag says Tiffany St. Clair. Yes, she just accused me of having a weapon. Yes, I'll wait." Otis lowered the phone, but didn't close it. He looked at Tiffany. "The director of operations is on his way down here." Tiffany froze. Then she threw her head back and laughed, a loud, cackling sound that drew stares from the entire terminal. "The director of operations," she mocked. "Oh, honey, you think you can just call the director of operations on a flip phone? Who do you think you are? You probably called your grandson to come pick you up." She turned to the officers. "Get them out of here, now. They are delusional, and I'm not having crazy people on my flight." One of the officers grabbed Otis by the elbow. "All right, Pops, let's go. Don't make this hard." "Take your hands off him," Martha cried out, stepping forward, finding a sudden surge of courage. "Mum, step back," the officer warned. Just as the officer began to pull Otis away, the bridge door behind the podium flew open. "Stop!" The voice was booming, authoritative, and terrifyingly loud. Tiffany spun around. Standing there wasn't the director of operations. It was Captain Anderson, the pilot of the flight, and he looked furious. "Captain," Tiffany said, her voice pitching up into a damsel in distress whine. "Thank God you're here. These two passengers are refusing to—" "Be quiet, Tiffany," Captain Anderson snapped. He didn't look at her. He walked straight past her, straight past the stunned police officers, and stood in front of Otis. To everyone's shock, the captain, a man with 4 stripes on his shoulders and 30 years of experience, removed his hat. He bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Washington," the captain said, his voice filled with immense respect. "Mrs. Washington, I was informed you were on the manifest, but when you didn't board, I got worried. Is everything all right?" Tiffany's jaw dropped. The silence in the gate area was deafening. "Well, Captain," Otis said, straightening his jacket and shaking off the officer's hand. "It seems your gate agent here thinks my money isn't green enough for your airline. She reassigned us to the toilets and then called the police on us." The captain slowly turned to face Tiffany. His face was pale. "You did what?" he whispered. Tiffany stammered, her confidence shattering like glass. "They looked, their clothes, and the seats were—" "Who is this man?" the police officer asked, looking confused. "Is he a VIP?" Otis smiled, but it was a cold, hard smile. "I'm not a VIP," Otis said. "I'm the VO." "VO?" Tiffany whispered. "The very owner," Otis said. "I own Sovereign Air. I bought the majority stake 3 weeks ago. And Tiffany, we need to have a talk." The silence that befell Gate 42 was heavier than the jet fuel fumes wafting from the tarmac. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum, sucking the air out of Tiffany St. Clair's lungs. The police officer released Otis's arm as if it were made of red-hot iron. He took a step back, his hand hovering near his belt, unsure whether to apologize or run away. "The owner!" Tiffany squeaked. Her voice, usually so sharp and projecting, was now a thin, reedy tremble. She looked from Otis to Captain Anderson, her eyes darting frantically. Denial, the first stage of grief, crashed over her like a tidal wave. "That's impossible," she blurted out, her old arrogance fighting to survive the shock. "Captain, this is a joke, right? Look at them. He's wearing a windbreaker from a thrift store. This is some kind of undercover boss reality show prank? Where are the cameras?" She started looking around wildly, scanning the ceiling tiles for lenses. Captain Anderson didn't blink. His face was a mask of stone. "Ms. St. Clair, I assure you, there are no cameras, but there is a corporate memo sent out 3 weeks ago regarding the acquisition of Sovereign Air by the Washington Holdings Group. Did you not read your company emails?" Tiffany swallowed hard. She never read the emails. She usually deleted them to make room for shopping newsletters. Otis stepped forward, smoothing the front of his windbreaker. He looked at the terrified gate agent with a gaze that was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment, the kind a grandfather gives a child who has done something truly malicious. "You judge a book by its cover, Tiffany," Otis said softly. "You see, my wife and I, we come from a time where you didn't wear your wealth on your sleeve. We wear our history. This coat, I wore it the day I signed my first construction contract 40 years ago. It brings me luck. But you saw old clothes and assumed trash." "I was just following protocol," Tiffany stammered, backing up until her heels hit the podium. "We have strict guidelines about brand image. I was trying to protect the airline." "Is humiliating paying customers part of the brand image?" Martha asked. Her voice was gentle, but it cut through the air like a knife. "Is calling the police on 2 elderly people part of the protocol?" Before Tiffany could answer, the glass doors of the terminal entrance slid open with a violent whoosh. A man in a sharp navy suit actually ran, toward the gate, flanked by 2 breathless assistants. It was Director Sullivan, the regional manager of operations. He was a man who usually terrified his staff, but right now he looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He spotted Otis and nearly slid to a halt on the polished floor. "Mr. Washington," Sullivan gasped, ignoring everyone else. "Mr. Washington, I am so sorry. I was in a meeting in Terminal 1. When I got your call, I came as fast as I could." Sullivan turned his head, his eyes locking onto Tiffany. The look he gave her could have peeled paint off the walls. "St. Clair, what have you done?" "I thought," Tiffany whispered, tears finally spilling over, ruining her expensive foundation. "She refused us boarding, Mr. Sullivan," Otis explained, his voice conversational. "She told us our first-class seats were broken, a lie, I assume, and tried to move us to the lavatory row. Then she called the police because she didn't like my tone. Sullivan turned a shade of purple, usually reserved for bruised fruit. You lied to a customer? You profiled the owner of the airline? Hand me your badge. Now. No, Tiffany cried, clutching the lanyard around her neck. Please, I need this job. I have a lease. I have car payments. You can't just fire me over a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, it's gross misconduct, Sullivan barked. Give me the badge. Wait, Otis said, raising a hand. Sullivan froze. Tiffany froze. Don't fire her, Otis said. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Martha looked at her husband, knowing that look. It was the look he had when he was about to teach a lesson that hurt more than a firing. Mr. Washington, Sullivan asked, confused. She humiliated you. If you fire her now, she goes home, cries for a day, blames us, and finds another job where she treats people the same way, Otis said. She learns nothing. She just becomes a victim in her own mind. Otis turned to Tiffany. You wanted to protect the first-class experience, Tiffany? Fine. You're going to curate it. I want you on this flight. You want me to work the flight? Tiffany asked, sniffing, a glimmer of hope sparking in her chest. She thought she had wiggled out of it. Not just work it, Otis said, a small, dangerous smile playing on his lips. I want you to be our personal attendant. You will serve us. You will serve the people you tried to throw out. And I want to see if you can do it with a smile. If you can serve my kind with the same respect you give the man in the Italian suit, maybe you keep your job. If you slip up once, well, Mr. Sullivan will handle the paperwork. Tiffany nodded frantically. I can do that, I promise. I will give you the best service of your life, Mr. Washington. We'll see, Otis said. He offered his arm to Martha. Shall we board? I believe seat 2A is waiting. As they walked past the podium, the crowd of passengers, economy and first class alike, parted like the Red Sea. Some even clapped. But one man didn't clap. Mr. Sterling, the man in the grey suit who had bypassed them earlier, stood near the jet bridge door. He looked annoyed. He checked his Rolex again. Great, Sterling muttered loud enough for Otis to hear. Now we have to wait for a performance review before we can take off. Some of us actually have businesses to run, Washington. Just buy the airline and shut up. Otis paused. He looked at Mr. Sterling. The Karma train hadn't finished its route yet. It was just picking up speed. The interior of the Boeing 777 was a sanctuary of cream leather and walnut trim. The first-class cabin was designed to make the outside world disappear, but the tension inside the metal tube was thicker than the pressurized air. Otis and Martha settled into seats, 2A and 2B. They were spacious suites with sliding privacy doors, massive entertainment screens, and seats that laid fully flat. Martha ran her hand over the soft leather armrest, a stark contrast to the hard plastic chairs of the terminal. It's nice, Otis, she whispered, but I don't like that girl staring at us. Tiffany was in the galley, just a few feet away. She was frantically arranging crystal flutes on a silver tray. Her hands were shaking so badly, the glasses chimed together like wind chimes in a hurricane. She knew Otis was watching her. She knew the captain was watching her. She knew everyone was watching. She took a deep breath, plastered on her best smile, though it looked more like a grimace of pain, and walked into the aisle. Champagne, Mr. Washington? Mrs. Washington? Tiffany asked, her voice trembling. Thank you, Tiffany, Otis said politely. He took a glass. Is this the vintage stock? The Dom Perignon? Yes, sir. Poured fresh. Good. Otis took a sip. He didn't say anything else. He just watched her. Tiffany moved to the next row. Seat 1A, Mr. Sterling. Sterling was typing furiously on a laptop, ignoring the safety briefing playing on the screen. When Tiffany offered the tray, he didn't even look up. Scotch, neat, And make it a double. I need to wash away the taste of this delay, Sterling snapped. Right away, Mr. Sterling, Tiffany said, relieved to be dealing with a normal, rich person. She felt a kinship with him. He was rude, yes, but he was rude in a way she understood. He was supposed to be rude. He was the elite. She rushed back with the scotch. As she placed it down, Sterling leaned in, lowering his voice. Unbelievable, isn't it? Sterling muttered, gesturing vaguely behind him toward the Washingtons. Affirmative action in the boardroom. Guy probably bought the company with a government grant or a lawsuit settlement, ruining the exclusivity of the brand. Tiffany froze. She was holding the napkin. She looked at Sterling, then back at Otis. Otis was reading a newspaper, but his ear was cocked. He had heard. In the past, Tiffany would have nodded, maybe even giggled, and agreed to ingratiate herself with the wealthy passenger. But now, her job hung by a thread. She was trapped between the man she wanted to be like and the man who owned her fate. I wouldn't know, sir, Tiffany said weakly. Oh, come on, Sterling scoffed, taking a swig of the scotch. You were the only one with guts back at the gate. Tried to keep the riffraff out. I saw you. You have good instincts. If this airline goes down the toilet under the new management, give me a call. My firm needs a receptionist who knows how to gatekeep. He slid a business card onto her tray. Tiffany stared at the card. It was gold-embossed, Sterling Global Equities. It was a lifeline, a way out. If Otis fired her, she had a backup. A small spark of her old arrogance flared up. She pocketed the card. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, she whispered. I'll keep that in mind. Excuse me. A voice boomed from row 2. Tiffany jumped. She spun around. Otis had lowered his newspaper. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, is it? Otis asked. Sterling turned around in his seat, annoyed. Yes? Can I help you, or do you need instructions on how to use the seat controls? I know how the seat works, Otis said, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling through the cabin. I also know how Sterling Global Equities works. You're a hedge fund manager. You specialize in shorting pharmaceutical stocks and hostile takeovers of manufacturing plants in the Midwest. You strip the pensions, fire the workers, and sell the assets. Sterling's eyes narrowed. I'm a businessman. It's called capitalism. Something you might have stumbled into, but I built it. You didn't build anything, Otis said calmly. You destroy things. And I heard what you just said to my employee. I was exercising my freedom of speech, Sterling sneered. If you don't like it, put on some headphones. Otis unbuckled his seatbelt. The fasten seatbelt sign was on, but nobody dared tell him to sit down. He stood up, towering over the cabin. Despite his age and his limp, he cast a long shadow. Tiffany, Otis said. Yes, sir, Tiffany stammered, clutching the empty tray to her chest. Mr. Sterling seems to believe he is in the wrong environment, Otis said. He thinks this airline is going down the toilet. I would hate to force a man to fly on an airline he has no respect for. It seems like bad customer service to keep him here. I don't understand, Tiffany said. We are still at the gate, Otis said, checking his watch. The door hasn't closed yet. He looked at Tiffany, then pointed at the door. Escort Mr. Sterling off my plane. The silence returned. This time it was absolute. Sterling laughed. You're joking. You can't kick me off. I paid $6,000 for this seat. I'm a Diamond Medallion member. I don't care if you're the King of England, Otis said. You insulted my wife. You insulted me. And you tried to poach my staff while disparaging my company. This is a private business, Mr. Sterling, and we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Isn't that right, Tiffany? Otis turned his gaze to Tiffany. It was a test, the ultimate test. Tiffany looked at Mr. Sterling, the man who offered her a job, the man who represented the elite world she worshipped. Then she looked at Otis, the man in the thrift store coat who held her life in his hands. She looked at Sterling's sneering face. Suddenly, he didn't look elite. He looked cruel. He looked like her 10 minutes ago. And it was ugly. Tiffany took a breath. She straightened her spine. "Mr. Sterling," Tiffany said, her voice gaining a surprising amount of steel. "Please gather your belongings." "You little witch," Sterling hissed, standing up aggressively. "You think you can—" "Sir!" Tiffany shouted, stepping back but not retreating. "Do not speak to me that way. Grab your bag and exit the aircraft, or I will have the captain call the authorities to remove you for aggressive behavior." Sterling looked around. The other passengers were glaring at him now. The tide had turned. He grabbed his briefcase, his face beet red. "You'll hear from my lawyers," Sterling shouted at Otis as he stomped past. "I'll sue this airline into the ground." "Get in line," Otis said dryly, sitting back down. Tiffany watched Sterling storm out of the cabin. She stood there, chest heaving. She had just kicked out a high-value client to protect the man she had called a pauper. She turned to Otis, waiting for his approval, waiting for a good job. Otis didn't smile. He just adjusted his glasses. "We're 5 minutes behind schedule now, Tiffany. Please ask the captain to push back, and bring Martha a warm blanket. Her legs get cold." Tiffany blinked. No praise. No gold star. "Yes, sir," she whispered. As she walked to the cockpit, she realized something terrifying. The test wasn't over. It had just begun. The flight to London was 7 hours long, and she was going to have to serve the Washingtons for every single second of it, knowing that one wrong move would end her career. But as the plane taxied to the runway, the real drama was brewing in the economy cabin. Because while Otis was teaching Tiffany a lesson in humility, word of the incident had leaked. A passenger in row 4 had recorded the entire interaction at the gate, and he had just hit upload to TikTok. By the time they landed in London, Tiffany St. Clair wouldn't just be fighting for her job. She would be the most hated woman on the internet. 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, the cabin of Flight 902 was a capsule of manufactured serenity. The scent of warm rosemary focaccia and roasted sea bass wafted through the first-class cabin. Tiffany St. Clair was moving with the precision of a Swiss watch, but inside, her gears were grinding against each other. She had served the appetizer, lobster thermidor, and the salad, arugula with truffles, without making eye contact with Otis or Martha. She placed the silverware down silently. She refilled water glasses before they were half empty. She was perfect. She was invisible. But while the cabin was quiet, the invisible waves of the plane's satellite Wi-Fi were screaming. Tiffany noticed it first in row 4. 2 teenage girls, daughters of a tech mogul, were huddled over an iPad. They kept glancing up at the galley, then back at the screen, giggling and whispering. Then, the businessman in 3C, a man who usually slept through flights, was wide awake, scrolling through his phone with a frown. He looked at Tiffany with an expression that wasn't just annoyance. It was disgust. Tiffany retreated to the galley, her hands shaking as she gripped the counter. "Paranoia," she told herself. "They're just looking. You're stressed." She reached for her own phone, which she had hidden in her apron pocket. She knew she shouldn't check it during service, but she had to know. She opened her social media app. Her notifications were frozen. The number was just a solid red block. 99+. She tapped the icon. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. A video was trending. The thumbnail was her face, contorted in a sneer, pointing a finger at Otis's chest back at the gate. The caption, Written in bold yellow letters read, "Racist flight attendant tries to block airline owner. Instant karma." It had been uploaded 40 minutes ago. It had 2.3 million views. Tiffany tapped the video. She watched herself, grainy and horrible, mocking Otis's coat. She heard her own voice, shrill and cruel. People who smell like mothballs and desperation. She scrolled to the comments. User 882. "I know her. That's Tiffany St. Clair. She was rude to my mum last year at JFK. Finally getting what she deserves." Fly High at 22. "Imagine being that arrogant on a salary. Hope she enjoys the unemployment line." Justice served. Sovereign Air better fire her mid-flight. Parachute her out. Doc's Master. "Found her Instagram. Let's go say hi." Tiffany felt the blood drain from her face. Her stomach lurched violently. This wasn't just a reprimand from a boss anymore. This was the end of her life. Her reputation was being incinerated in real time while she was trapped in a metal tube, unable to run, unable to hide. "Miss!" Tiffany jumped, nearly dropping a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. Otis Washington was standing in the galley doorway. He wasn't sitting in his throne-like seat. He was standing there, leaning on his cane, watching her. "Mr. Washington," Tiffany gasped, quickly shoving her phone into her pocket. "I was just preparing the dessert cart. I can bring it out now." "I don't want dessert, Tiffany," Otis said. His voice was low, barely audible over the hum of the engines. "I want to know why half the cabin is staring at you." Tiffany looked down at her shoes. She couldn't breathe. "There's a video, sir. Someone recorded what happened at the gate. It's viral." Otis sighed. It was a long, weary sound. He maneuvered into the small galley space, closing the curtain behind him to give them privacy. "I didn't ask for that," Otis said. "I don't believe in public shaming. It lacks dignity." "My life is over," Tiffany whispered, tears cutting tracks through her makeup again. "Millions of people hate me. Even if I keep this job, I'll never be able to show my face in an airport again. They're posting my name. They're finding my family." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "Mr. Washington, please. You have the power. You can make them take it down. You own the airline. You have PR people. Please." Otis studied her. For the first time, he didn't look at her with disappointment. He looked at her with pity. "You want me to save you from the consequences of your own actions," Otis stated. Again. "I'm sorry," Tiffany sobbed quietly. "I'm so sorry for what I said. I was stressed, and the holidays and—" "Stop," Otis ordered. The command was soft, but absolute. "Do not blame the holidays. Do not blame stress. Stress doesn't make you cruel, Tiffany. Stress reveals who you really are. It squeezes you, and what's inside comes out." Today, arrogance came out. He stepped closer, his presence filling the small space. "You look at me and you see a rich man now," Otis said. "But 40 years ago, I cleaned the floors of Terminal 4. I wore a blue jumpsuit with a name tag that said janitor. I was invisible. People walked over my wet floors and tracked mud without looking at me. They threw trash at my feet." Tiffany stared at him, stunned. "One day," Otis continued, his eyes drifting to the past, "a gate agent, a woman very much like you, yelled at me because I was mopping near the first-class lounge. She said I was disturbing the aesthetic. She made me feel small. She made me feel like I wasn't a human being. I vowed that day," Otis said, his gaze locking back onto Tiffany, "that if I ever made something of myself, I would never let anyone in my employ treat a human being like trash. Not a janitor. Not a grandmother in a church dress. Nobody." "I didn't know," Tiffany whispered. "Ignorance is not a defense," Otis said. "It is a choice. You chose not to look at us. You chose to look at the clothes." "What do I do?" Tiffany asked, her voice breaking. "Everyone hates me." "You finish the flight," Otis said firmly. "You go out there, you hold your head up, and you serve the passengers. You don't hide in the galley. You take the heat. You let them look at you. And you learn what it feels like to be judged by strangers. That is your penance." He turned to leave, but paused at the curtain. "And Tiffany, if you engage with any of them, if you snap back, if you defend yourself, you're fired. Silence is your only shield now. Wear it." Otis walked back to his seat. Tiffany was left alone in the galley, the hum of the engines roaring in her ears. She wiped her face with a cocktail napkin, fixed her bun, and grabbed the dessert cart. She had 5 hours left to go, and the cabin was waiting. 2 hours later, the atmosphere on Flight 902 shifted violently. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, tight and urgent. "Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. We are hitting a patch of severe clean air turbulence." Before Tiffany could even stow the coffee pot, the plane dropped. It wasn't a dip. It was a plunge. The sensation was like the floor vanishing beneath her feet. Cups rattled in their racks, and a collective gasp echoed through the cabin. Tiffany threw herself onto the jump seat near the front galley, buckling the harness with trembling hands. The massive aircraft shook violently, shuddering as if a giant hand were shaking a toy. "Otis!" Martha's voice rang out from seat 2B, sharp with panic. Tiffany strained her neck to look. The privacy divider between the Washingtons was down. Otis was reaching for Martha's hand, but the turbulence was thrashing them around. "My chest!" Martha cried out, clutching her blouse. "Otis, I can't the air!" The plane lurched again, banking hard to the left. Tiffany saw Martha's face. It wasn't just fear. It was grey. Her eyes were rolling back. "She's having an attack!" Otis shouted, unbuckling his seatbelt despite the fasten seatbelt light flashing furiously. "Help! Someone help!" The other flight attendants were strapped in at the rear of the cabin. The turbulence was too severe for them to walk the length of the plane. Tiffany was the only one close enough. Tiffany looked at the shaking ceiling. She looked at the terrified passengers. She looked at Otis, struggling to hold his wife upright while the plane bucked like a bronco. "Protocol says stay seated," her mind screamed. "Safety first. Do not unbuckle." But then she remembered the video. She remembered the comments calling her a monster. She remembered Otis's story about the janitor. "Who are you?" she asked herself. "Are you the girl who worries about her hair, or are you a flight attendant?" Tiffany clicked her harness open. She didn't walk. She crawled. Keeping her center of gravity low, she dragged herself along the carpeted aisle, gripping the bases of the seats as the plane slammed upward. "Get back in your seat!" Mr. Sterling's empty seat seemed to mock her as she passed it. She reached row 2. Otis was trying to find Martha's medication in her oversized purse, but his hands were shaking too hard, and the bag had spilled its contents onto the floor. "She has angina!" Otis yelled over the roar of the engines. "She needs a spray! It's in the bag!" Tiffany didn't hesitate. She grabbed the bag, ignoring the contents spilling everywhere. Tissues, hard candies, old receipts. She scanned the debris on the floor. There. A small red inhaler had rolled under the footrest of seat 2A. The plane dropped again, slamming Tiffany's shoulder into the armrest. A jolt of pain shot down her arm, but she lunged forward, grabbing the inhaler. She pulled herself up to Martha. The older woman was gasping, her lips turning a faint shade of blue. "Mrs. Washington," Tiffany said, her voice surprisingly steady amidst the chaos. "Look at me. Open your mouth." She guided the inhaler to Martha's lips and depressed the canister. "Breathe in. Deep." Martha gasped, inhaling the medicine. "Again," Tiffany commanded. She waited a beat. "Now." She administered a second dose. Then Tiffany did something she hadn't done in years. She didn't move away. She knelt on the floor, ignoring the bruising impacts of the turbulence, and wrapped her arms around Martha's shoulders, bracing the older woman against the seat. "I've got you," Tiffany whispered into Martha's ear. "I've got you. The plane is strong. We're going to be okay. Just breathe with me, in and out." For 10 agonizing minutes, the plane fought the sky. Tiffany stayed on her knees, acting as a human shield, absorbing the shock so Martha wouldn't have to. She stroked Martha's hair, the hair she had looked at with disdain earlier that morning. It was soft. It smelled of lavender soap. Otis sat across from them, gripping the armrests, watching. He watched Tiffany protect his wife with her own body. He saw the bruise forming on Tiffany's arm. He saw the mascara running down her face, not from vanity, but from exertion. Finally, the shaking stopped. The engines settled into a smooth, steady hum. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Anderson's voice came over the speaker, sounding breathless. "Apologies for the rough ride. We've moved to a cleaner altitude. Flight attendants, check in." Tiffany slumped back against the galley wall, exhausted. Her uniform was disheveled, her perfect bun was a mess, and her knee was bleeding through her stocking where it had scraped the metal seat track. Martha took a deep, shuddering breath. The color was returning to her cheeks. She turned her head and looked down at Tiffany. "You got my spray?" Martha whispered. "Yes, ma'am," Tiffany panted. "You got hurt," Martha noticed, pointing to Tiffany's bleeding knee. "It's nothing," Tiffany said, pulling her skirt down to cover it. "Just a scratch. Are you feeling better? Do you need oxygen? I can get the tank." Martha reached out. Her hand, weathered and warm, took Tiffany's hand. "Thank you," Martha said. "You saved me." Tiffany froze. The touch was electric. It was forgiveness. Otis unbuckled and leaned forward. He picked up the cane that had fallen and used it to push himself up. He looked at the mess on the floor, the spilled purse, the scattered receipts. He knelt down. "Mr. Washington, no!" Tiffany scrambled to stop him. "I'll clean that up. Please, sit down." "No," Otis said. He picked up the inhaler. Then he picked up a roll of peppermint candies. He placed them gently back in the purse. "You did the heavy lifting, Tiffany. Let me do the cleaning." He looked her in the eye. The coldness was gone. The disappointment was gone. "You broke protocol," Otis noted. "You unbuckled during severe turbulence." Tiffany swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I'll accept the disciplinary write-up." "You prioritized the passenger over your own safety," Otis corrected. "That's not a write-up. That's a commendation." He handed the purse to Martha and then offered a hand to Tiffany to help her stand. "You have a lot of work to do to fix your heart, Tiffany," Otis said quietly, so only she could hear. "And the internet, well, that's going to be a storm you'll have to weather for a long time. But what I saw just now, that was real service. That was human." Tiffany nodded, tears welling up again. But this time they weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of relief. "Now," Otis said, dusting off his knees. "Go fix yourself up. You look like you've been in a prize fight. And bring Martha a glass of water. No ice." "Yes, sir," Tiffany said. "Right away." As she walked back to the galley, limping slightly, she passed the teenagers in row 4. They weren't giggling anymore. They were staring at her with wide eyes. They had seen her crawl. They had seen her shield the old woman. One of the girls slowly lowered her iPad. She didn't film this part, but she had seen it. The flight continued to London. The atmosphere had changed. The resentment in the cabin had evaporated, replaced by a begrudging respect. Tiffany St. Clair was still the woman from the viral video, but on Flight 902, she was also the woman who had bled to save the owner's wife. But as the plane began its descent into Heathrow, a new reality set in. The internet doesn't forgive as easily as Martha Washington, and upon landing, Tiffany would have to face the millions of people who hadn't seen what happened at 35,000 feet. The wheels of the Boeing 777 kissed the tarmac of Heathrow Airport with a gentle thud, followed by the roar of reverse thrusters. For most passengers, it was the sound of arrival. For Tiffany St. Clair, it sounded like the slamming of a prison cell door. As the aircraft taxied toward Terminal 5, the fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. Almost immediately, the cabin filled with the sound of seatbelts clicking and phones chirping as they reconnected to the cellular network. Tiffany stood in the forward galley, bracing herself. She smoothed her skirt, checking the bandage on her knee. She looked perfect again, on the outside. But inside, she was vibrating with terror. "Tiffany," the purser, a stern woman named Joyce, whispered. Captain Anderson called back. "There's a team meeting us at the gate, corporate HR and a PR crisis manager." Tiffany nodded numbly. "They're going to fire me right on the jet bridge, aren't they?" "I don't know," Joyce said, her eyes sympathetic for the first time. "But that video, Tiffany, it's on CNN." Tiffany felt the blood leave her head. CNN. It wasn't just an internet spat anymore. It was international news. "Airline owner racially profiled by staff." She could see the headline burning in her mind. The cabin door opened. The cool, damp London air rushed in, smelling of rain and jet fuel. Otis and Martha Washington were the first to stand. Otis put on his flat cap and adjusted his windbreaker. Martha wrapped her old wool coat around her, looking small but dignified. Tiffany stepped forward. This was it. The last time she would see them. "Mr. Washington, Mrs. Washington," Tiffany said, her voice shaking but clear. "Thank you for flying with us today, and I am deeply sorry. For everything." Otis stopped. He looked at the young woman who had blocked his path in New York, and then at the woman who had bruised her knees to save his wife over the Atlantic. "We have a car waiting," Otis said. "Walk with us." "Sir, walk with us off the plane," Otis commanded. "I don't want you facing the wolves alone." Tiffany hesitated, then followed. They walked out of the aircraft, up the jet bridge, and into the terminal. The scene that awaited them was chaotic. A small horde of paparazzi had gathered near the arrival gate, tipped off by the viral storm. Flashes erupted like lightning as soon as Otis appeared. A sleek, severe-looking woman in a black power suit, Sovereign Air's London crisis manager, stepped forward, flanked by 2 security guards. "Mr. Washington," the PR manager said, breathless, "we have a secure exit ready. We need to issue a statement immediately. We have drafted a press release announcing the immediate termination of the employee involved to protect the stock price." She pointed a sharp finger at Tiffany. "You, hand over your badge. Security will escort you to the operations office for processing." The cameras clicked furiously. Tiffany reached for her lanyard, her eyes burning with tears. This was the justice the world wanted. "No," Otis said. The PR manager froze. "Excuse me, sir. The backlash is severe. We need a head on a spike." "You don't get hers," Otis said calmly, stepping between Tiffany and the cameras. He raised his cane slightly, signaling for silence. The paparazzi, sensing a scoop, quieted down. "This young woman made a mistake today," Otis said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "A grave mistake. She judged us by our appearance. She was arrogant. She was wrong." Tiffany hung her head, the shame burning her cheeks. "But," Otis continued, his voice softening, "somewhere over the ocean, when the air turned rough and my wife's heart faltered, this same woman crawled on her hands and knees to save her. She shielded my wife with her own body. She bled for a passenger she had previously disrespected. Otis turned to the PR manager. "We don't fire people who are willing to learn, Ms. Reynolds. We teach them. If you fire her, she becomes a martyr for the angry or a victim for the pitying. If she stays, she becomes an example." He turned to Tiffany. "You keep your job, Tiffany, but you lose your stripes." Tiffany looked up, confused. "Sir?" "You are no longer a senior flight attendant," Otis declared. "Effective immediately, you are demoted to junior trainee. You will undergo 6 months of retraining, and not just safety drills. You're going to volunteer at the Inner City Youth Center in Chicago, the one my foundation runs. You're going to learn what it's like to have nothing but your dignity. You will learn to see people, not status." Tiffany choked back a sob. I'll do anything." "Good," Otis said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It wasn't his. It was the one Mr. Sterling had given Tiffany, the gold-embossed card of the hedge fund manager. "And as for Mr. Sterling," Otis said, holding the card up for the cameras, "the man who was removed from my flight for abusing my crew, I want it known that Sovereign Air has cancelled our corporate contract with Sterling Global Equities. We don't fly people who think money gives them the right to be cruel." He tore the card in half and let the pieces flutter to the floor. "Come, Martha," Otis said, taking his wife's arm. "Let's get to the Savoy. I need a cup of tea." As the couple walked away, the cameras didn't follow them. They stayed on Tiffany. But the narrative had shifted. It wasn't just a story of a racist breakdown anymore. It was a story of mercy. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of O'Hare International Airport. At Gate B12, a flight was boarding for Miami. At the podium stood a woman in a Sovereign Air uniform, but there were no gold stripes on her sleeve. She wore the simple navy blue of a trainee. Her hair wasn't in a severe, tight bun. It was in a practical ponytail. She wore less makeup. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. A young mother approached the podium, struggling with a crying baby, a stroller, and 2 heavy bags. She looked exhausted and disheveled, wearing sweatpants and a stained T-shirt. "I'm sorry," the mother said, fumbling for her boarding pass. "I'm such a mess. I know I'm holding up the line." Tiffany St. Clair smiled. It wasn't the porcelain, fake smile of the past. It was a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You're doing just fine," Tiffany said gently. She stepped out from behind the podium. "Here, let me take that bag for you. We have a pre-boarding area right here. You take a breath. I've got you." Tiffany scanned the pass and guided the woman to the priority seating, the same spot she used to guard like a bulldog. "Thank you," the mother exhaled, looking at Tiffany's name tag. "You're an angel." Tiffany touched the small pin on her lapel. A tiny silver heart, a gift from Martha Washington, sent after she completed her volunteer hours. "No," Tiffany whispered. "I'm just someone who learned to see." She looked out the window at the tarmac, where a massive Sovereign Air jet was being prepped. She knew Otis Washington was probably in a boardroom somewhere, making decisions that shook the industry. She would never own the airline. She would never be a billionaire. But as she helped the young mother fold her stroller, Tiffany felt richer than she ever had in first class. The karma had hit hard, but it hadn't destroyed her. It had chiseled away the stone to reveal the human underneath. And that was a flight path worth taking. It's easy to judge the world based on what we see on the surface. The clothes, the cars, the titles. Tiffany thought she was protecting her airline's image, but she was actually destroying its soul. She learned the hard way that the most valuable passengers aren't the ones with the deepest pockets, but the ones with the biggest hearts. And sometimes, the person you look down on today is the person who holds your fate tomorrow. Otis Washington showed us that true power isn't about firing people or crushing them. It's about giving them a chance to change. Mercy is a luxury that only the truly wealthy in spirit can afford. What would you have done if you were Otis? Would you have fired Tiffany on the spot, or would you have given her a second chance? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, hit that like button and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.